should be concerned about that. That's a political issue. I think
that's
legally the court has to decide if there's legislation that gives the authority to the president. If it is, he can do it. If not, they can't look at the consequences of it or what the outcome is. They have to decide, is that power baked in? Yes or no.
But the consequences will still be there. And I'm just saying that if we have a government right now that is highly inefficient, that is not working, that is going to be a political question that somebody is going to have to be a grown up in the room and have to answer to figure that out.
One of the things that will be fascinating is if the court does strike it down, watch the stock market absolutely explode. Seriously, you'll watch the S&P 500 jump like nobody's business, and the president is then going to be in the awkward position of having to explain why the markets are boosted by the rejection of his key policies.
The best example of that is going to be our American automakers. I mean, you're going to see their stock just explode. You're going to see those people who are doing that type of work, for example, who are building cars from Canada, the United States, and Mexico working together. Their stock, to your point, their stock's going to go through the roof.
Let's be real about what we just heard. These analysts are practically salivating at the thought of Trump being put in an awkward position. But here's the problem with their entire premise. They're assuming the stock market reaction tells the complete economic story. It doesn't. Stocks did rise following skeptical Supreme Court questioning about the tariffs, but that's a short-term reaction from traders betting on immediate relief from uncertainty. What these CNN analysts conveniently ignore is that Trump imposed these tariffs to deal with two dire emergencies: a persistent trade imbalance and the flood of fentanyl entering the United States. The real question isn't, will the stock market jump if tariffs are struck down? It's, what happens to American manufacturing, national security, and our ability to negotiate with China when we give up our primary leverage? But CNN doesn't want to have that conversation.
Well, let me let everybody hear what we heard from Justice Amy Coney Barrett on this issue of if they decide that this is not legal for the president to impose these tariffs, what happens next? Here's what she said.
If you win, tell me how the reimbursement process would work. Would it be a complete mess?
It's a very complicated thing. There's got to be an administrative protest. There was a harbor management case earlier that this court was involved with in the United States Shoe, in which, the refund process took a long time. There were any number of claims and equitable relief.
So a mess.
So it's difficult, okay. Absolutely. We don't deny that it's difficult.
Is there a possibility, this is to you or anyone at this table, is there a possibility that the court looks at this and says, we don't want this mess, so we're just going to rule a certain way?
No.
Or will they
I can't imagine that happens, and I really hope it doesn't happen, because I think setting a precedent like this is actually dangerous. We're supposed to have co-equal branches of government. Obviously, Congress throughout the years has ceded a lot of power to the executive branch, but using emergency powers to essentially make policy in the executive branch is wrong. And on top of that, I understand that it is going to be a mess. I mean, think about the farmers. The farmers have been hurt quite a bit as a result of these tariffs, and it's going to cause long-term damage to these farmers. But in the meantime, the Trump administration has decided to use some of the revenue from these tariffs to help make these farmers whole.
Now they're concerned trolling about farmers. Let me address this directly. The Trump administration has decided to use some of the revenue from these tariffs to help make farmers whole. So the administration already anticipated this and built in support for the Americans who might be temporarily affected. But here's the bigger picture these analysts don't want you to understand. China has been dumping cheap goods into our market for decades, destroying American manufacturing jobs. Trump claimed he has inherent authority as president under the Constitution to deal with national security and foreign affairs threats. This isn't just about trade. It's about whether communist China gets to continue manipulating currency, stealing intellectual property, and flooding our markets with subsidized products while American workers lose their livelihoods. The long-term damage to farmers pales in comparison to the long-term damage to our entire industrial base if we continue letting China cheat the system.
So to your point, yes, a lot of that money has already been spent already. I don't know how the refunds are going to work. I don't really care. What I care more about
one of the points that was made by a justice is if this power is given, how do we get it back?
Right.
You can't get it back. So they're not going to give this power because it's difficult to figure out. Because once it's out there, there's no president that's going to relinquish that power.
This is where the panel accidentally reveals the truth. The analyst says, if this power is given, how do we get it back? You can't get it back. There's no president that's going to relinquish that power. Exactly. And you know what? That's how it should be. Lower courts have ruled that Trump exceeded his authority under both the statute and the Constitution. But the president argues that both allow him to impose tariffs in order to deal with persistent trade imbalances and to stem the flood of fentanyl coming into the United States. The Constitution gives the president authority over foreign affairs and national security. Trade policy is foreign policy. Chief Justice Roberts acknowledged that tariffs involve foreign affairs, but noted that taxes impose taxes on Americans, and taxes have always been the core power of Congress. But here's what Roberts and these analysts are missing. These aren't revenue tariffs, they're regulatory tariffs designed to counter unfair foreign trade practices. The revenue is incidental. Solicitor General Sauer said, these are regulatory tariffs. They are not revenue-raising tariffs. Congress had 50 years to clarify the International Emergency Economic Powers Act if they didn't want presidents using it for trade policy. They didn't. Now they're mad that Trump actually used the tools Congress gave him to protect American workers. Here's the bottom line that and this panel don't want you to understand. Even if the Supreme Court strikes down Trump's use of IEEPA, he still has multiple other legal authorities to impose tariffs, including Section 232 for national security and Section 301 for unfair trade practices. The tariffs aren't going away. They'll just take a different form. Goldman Sachs economists said, we would expect the administration to use other authorities to impose substantially similar tariffs and that large trading partners would likely see little change. So all this hand-wringing and celebration from the left about Trump losing at the Supreme Court, it's premature. The policy objectives remain the same. Protect American workers, bring manufacturing back home, and stop letting China and other countries cheat the system. The stock market might get a temporary sugar high if the court strikes down these specific tariffs, but anyone with common sense knows that Trump will retain the ability to impose tariffs under other authorities, though none will allow him to change import duties with the flick of a switch, as he has done with IEEPA. The real awkward position isn't Trump's. It's the position of every politician who's been selling out American workers to globalist trade policies for the past 30 years. Trump exposed that scam, and now they're desperate to stuff the genie back in the bottle. It's not going to work. Americans with two brain cells to rub together can see what's really happening here. The establishment is terrified that someone finally stood up to China and put American workers first. Whether it's IEEPA or Section 301 or Section 232, the tariffs are staying because the problem they're addressing, unfair foreign trade practices, is real and it's not going away.